Hey everybody, and welcome to another Final Fantasy XIV video. I'm your host Bryn here today, and we're going to be focusing on the conversation about macros. And so for anybody who's played Final Fantasy or any kind of MMO in general, a macro is essentially a saved set of commands that will allow you to execute certain abilities in a certain order. So it works really well in the world of Final Fantasy XIV, and I use a lot of them. In some of my other videos I've highlighted various macros that I use. But one of the things that came of late is that in previous live letters, Yoshi-P, the producer and director of the game, talked about the expansion of 4.0 and what does that mean for like abilities. And a lot of the conversation for 3.0 is that you've got this, we're on this verge if we haven't crossed over it already with ability bloat. And so what does that mean? And that's what I wanted to focus on here today. So I want to talk about kind of three things. The current state of macros, the issue with the current state of macros, obviously, and the third thing being and ideas that I've had to help improve that as we go forward in 4.0. So we don't know much of what is planned for 4.0 yet. We're going to be learning a lot about that at the next FanFest coming up in October. And to start, I want to talk about some ways that I think the system can be improved upon, especially if we're going to get some new abilities. So if you haven't used macros before, you can go under System and under User Macros to find those. And they're a pretty straightforward system right here. So if you kind of look at this Dark Knight main that I've got this macro icon, which says /, which gives that functionality of the icon. So it will combo, it will display its cooldown. It's very handy for you guys to use. And then you see I've got several abilities here. Kind of switching over to my summoner, like if I pick on that one, it's like I can kind of set these macros, these abilities to combo. So bio 2 and then tell it to wait, then miasma, then tell it to wait, and then bio. So I can stack right now 3 abilities onto one macro. Well, the problem is that it's got this natural weight in there, and it's not as fast as if you would do it yourself. So here I am just going to executing that macro. So my tank's going to go in there and go fight. And so this uses a system that I call fail through. So what it says is that it's just going to go for the first one, then the second one, then the third one, and I build in these artificial weights. If you look at my Dark Knight one, it uses fail through that it's going to try Mercy Stroke. If it's not available, it's going to use Hard Slash. If it's not available, it's going to use Plunge. If it's not available, it's going to use Unmend. And what this macro specifically gives me the ability to do is if I'm too far away, I will Unmend or Plunge. Otherwise, if I'm within striking distance, I'll use Mercy Stroke or Hard Slash. And that works for today. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work going forward. And the other weakness of this system is that if you don't know what you're doing, you could, effectively not essentially use the macro in the right way. And so I think there is a level of understanding that comes with the current system that makes it kind of weak or difficult to understand. And so that, you'll find if you Google macros, there's all kinds of really interesting macros out there. People will contend to put in various like conversational pieces into macros, as well as all other things that you can kind of think of. Like, okay, I'm going to stack Spur, Rouse, and then using Kindle. And how, again, the fail through works is that it will use Spur and it will, go through. It won't actually execute the other macros until you press the button multiple times. So pressing this 3 times essentially gives me the ability to put 3 abilities onto one button slot. And as a controller, primarily controller player, that is very handy. And you can designate which icons are actually macros versus which aren't. So if I target this guy, press it again, there's the 2 abilities, and then I press it the 3rd time, and now he's going to use that ability itself. So that's how the current system works. But let's say with 4.0, we get into the idea of, like, let's say we just add 5 more abilities, which will be exciting. In fact, Elliot over at Massively OP today had his article for Final Fantasy that really kind of talked about that the exciting part about leveling is getting that something new. And so not getting any abilities in 4.0 might seem a little bit strange, and we don't know yet what the plan is for it, but this is all focused in on Yoshi-P's comments about how to improve the current macro system. And so I had a couple of thoughts on how to do that. So kind of the first idea is, we've seen this in WoW and a couple others, is what I would call kind of an order of operations macro, meaning that as I go to attack, as I stack this ability, instead of having to put in that wait command, it would just say use this ability, and if I'm still on the same target, use the next ability the next time I press the button, and use the next ability after that the next time I press the button, and until it hits the end of that stack or I change targets, it will continue to go in order. So instead of me just pressing this button once and it executing while line after line with the waits, it would just wait for me to go ahead and press the button again, much like kind of the fail-through system that I've got here, except for if I would change targets, it would restart at the very beginning ability press until it hit the very end if I was on the same target. And so that's kind of, there's probably a better term for it, and not being a super avid WoW player, I wouldn't know that. But that's what I remember building out some macros in WoW that would do that. And it was very handy. It was very easy to understand and go forward. So it would allow you to be able to say, like, if you have certain buffs and things that you want to place, that it would just go one after the next. And if that would start over with the new target, you could do that there. Now, there's another concept that we have with, let's say, what I would call highest ability macros. And you have that ability here. So do you want to use Thunder 3, Thunder 2, or Thunder 1 like as a Black Mage? And so with the Thunder abilities, whenever I go in and I'm playing anything, where I'm level synced and I don't have access to maybe Thunder 3, well, I don't want to have to like slot, Thunder 1 or Thunder 2 on any particular cross hotbar or hotbar for myself, just because it can be rather annoying to use up that space. So in this case, I'd use this kind of a macro that says I'm going to use my highest level Thunder ability on the target. The problem is that this can be error prone, that it might trigger Thunder 2 when I want a Thunder 3. Not all the time, mind you, but it still happens. And so, the other kind of idea that they could kind of set up is that as we get abilities that are essentially replacements for other abilities, we could macro those together so that it would always, no matter what level sync you are, use the best version of that ability, just like Thunder 3 over Thunder, And so now, as there are different abilities that you want differently, then you're going to obviously have to go with, kind of the order of operations approach for applying different things in that regard. But this is just an example of how that could be handy with the highest level ability, especially if we get abilities that replace other abilities on the system, then we could go from there. Now, the third idea for kind of improving the system would be what I would call kind of combination macros. So if I switch over to my Dark Knight just for a bit, just to kind of show off a kind of a combo, you can see that when I go to engage, as I do that, my combos become more prevalent and they're displayed. So what a combo macro would do would be the ability to kind of link those all together in and of itself into a macro. So just focusing on this, going to the next ability, it would basically be applying an if statement to your macros, therefore allowing you to say, if the combo if the action was successful and a combo is triggered, or a proc, I guess, if you will, that it would allow you to use that. And so where you would have abilities that proc other abilities, you could, in theory, group those together and say, okay, I want you to use hard slash, then I want you to use spinning slash, then I want you to use whatever is next in that order, but only if the combo is present. So if you miss the attack, that it doesn't move you to the next one, therefore reducing your ability to combo, as well as reducing your overall DPS and losing those benefits from it. So it's here where, since these really don't combo, that I get that ability. But if, let's say, Bio 2 had a chance to proc a higher potency miasma, well, I wouldn't want to cast miasma unless I got that proc. Now, some jobs are a little bit different. Bard doesn't always proc different things, but imagine the ability to stack those in macros, saying, hey, if this is usable, I want to use that ability, and thus saving some space. Now, all of that being said, is that the counter argument to improving the system and adding in those options is that you could, in theory, almost cheat the system in a way that the game is too easy, or it's not being played the way it's meant to be played. And I could fully respect and understand kind of the arguments there with that system. But the reality is that as we add in more and more actions, as we add in these things, just adding in more abilities, more macros to be able to create, doesn't necessarily solve the problem at hand, because you still have challenges where users won't be able to write their own macros because maybe they're too intimidated on the system. And so the last kind of thought regarding intimidation and the system in and of itself is that maybe the ability for users to create their own macros by, instead of saying set to hotbar, you could join hard slash to spinning slash to power slash or whatever you wanted to do, and you would be able to, from the actions pane, be able to kind of group things and then say, okay, I want it to be based off of triggers, I want it to be based off of order of operations, or I want it to be the highest ability available out of these, therefore returning more space to both keyboard and mouse players as well as controller players in and of itself. Now, I don't know if they're going to use any of these systems. I do know they've talked about how they could improve upon the existing, and these are just my ideas on kind of me playing amateur game designer, if you will. But I just wanted to share those. I've tried to think on how to write that out in an article, and I just I'm just gonna talk to you guys about it. I'm very interested in y'all's thoughts on what could be done to improve the macro system. If you guys have any ideas, so if you do, leave those in the comments below. I like to kind of get a gauge of those ideas, and maybe even then eventually write an article up about it for people to kind of read it once the ideas have been thoroughly processed and vetted. But all in all, I don't know when we'll hear about the improvement to the macro system. Yoshi-P, like I said, he mentioned that in one of the live letters in the past couple months. They did talk about what they call the double cross hotbar system, which is the ability to, instead of holding L trigger and R trigger, to double tap and have it fly out another kind of hotbar for you to use commands that aren't usually readily accessible all the time and things like that, which should be an improvement, especially for controller players as we move forward in new abilities. But anyway, that's those are my thoughts. We talked about the current state. It's pretty simple. Macros do what they need to do. We kind of talked about some of the issues with the current state with fail through, and how some things don't always proc and get triggered. And then obviously we talked about my ideas to help improve the system. But anyway, I guess here's the generic, social media end tag of like, favorite, share, subscribe, whatever. Bake a cake and have some fun with that. But I appreciate you guys checking out this video. See you next time.